back to another episode of Paris and Baz Cast, where we bring to you new guest speakers to talk about topics that impact property management, sales and finance. And today it's also going to be covering topics that impact buyers in the Australian market. The topic of discussion today is buying a property as a non-Australian citizen and all the different visa classes and what exactly they allow you to do in terms when it comes to buying a property. We have joining with us today Rustam Sandhu from iVisaPoint. Hello.
Hello everyone. How are you going?
Good. Very
Glad
good.
to have you on board today. So I'm excited.
Thank you very much.
And very excited to bring this topic, which has had a lot of conversation ever since we advertised it. A lot of questions have come about because it is basically those that are not citizen of Australia yet, wanting to invest in the property, wanting to take advantage of what is happening with the property market and what their options are. So
exactly.
Very good to talk about this. And we will have some insights on loans as well.
Finance, how to get finance, who can get finance.
So feel free to ask any questions while we are live. If there's anything that we can answer, more than happy to respond to you guys while we are live. So basically, to start off with, what exactly are the different types of buyer groups or the different visa groups that we can be talking about and how that impacts?
So basically, when it comes to property investment, there's three main visa groups. So one will be your permanent residents. So basically, permanent residents are treated the same as citizens. So they can buy property, get loans without many restrictions at all. The second category you have are temporary residents, and to be classified as a temporary resident for property purchase reasons, you have to have a temporary visa which was valid for at least 12 months from the date of grant. So it doesn't necessarily matter if you don't have 12 months remaining on the visa, but at the time the visa was granted, it should have been granted for at least 12 months. So that's your second category. And as part of temporary residence, those people that have applied for their permanent residency and are not yet permanent residents, they're classified on bridging visas. So those people that are on bridging visas waiting for their permanent visa to be granted, they would also be classified as temporary residents for property purchasing reasons. The third category you have are non-residents. So non-residents can be classified as those people on visitor visas or other types of temporary visas that are valid for less than 12 months, or it can be your foreign investors, so people that are offshore that are wanting to invest in Australia. The latter two categories, so temporary residents and non-residents, they do have restrictions imposed on the types of properties they can purchase. In addition to that, they have additional surcharges and stamp duty, other things they have to pay to actually obtain property. So realistically, they have a lot more hurdles before they can actually acquire any property. So to give you an example of that, for temporary residents, if they wish to purchase an existing dwelling, they can only purchase one. And that existing dwelling must be used as a principal place of residence. So they can't just purchase an existing house and then rent it out, okay? If they want to purchase an existing dwelling, they must live in that. And later on, say they want to move out of that property, or they pack up their bags, they want to go back home, that property must be sold within 6 months to avoid any additional problems. On top of that, the main requirement is to satisfy the Foreign Investment Review Board's requirements. So the Foreign Investment Review Board, otherwise known as FIRB, they are the governing body when it comes to overseas property investment. So they are the ones that decide what sort of restrictions are imposed, and moreover, what sort of approvals are needed for temporary residents or non-residents to purchase property in Australia. So
That is,
the standard way to get around that is, if you want to get approval to purchase a property in Australia, firstly, non-residents and temporary residents, you are required to have an approval before you can actually purchase property in Australia.
And just to add on to that, I know it's a very expensive exercise because some clients that have done it in the past need to have the right lawyers in place who have done it, have the experience that can gain approvals to get the firm over the line. Because without that, you won't be able to purchase. So, yeah.
Exactly. So there's two main ways to get approval, right? So if you're seeking approval to purchase a specific property, then something called a no objection notification should be applied for. That approval will allow you to purchase that specific property that you're interested in. But sometimes, I mean, looking at the property market right now in Sydney, you don't know what's going to happen. You may be outbid at an auction. You may not get you may not be settled. So for any reason that specific property can't be acquired, you can also look at an exemption certificate. So an exemption certificate essentially allows you to purchase a property in a specific state within a predetermined time frame. So generally that time frame is around 12 months, and it does have limitations imposed on it as well. So say if you get an exemption certificate to purchase a property for 1 million, right? Then you go on auction and the property goes for 1.2, 1.3. You will not be approved to actually purchase that property if it's above that 1 million.
So apply for more. And I'm sure there'll be different thresholds of what can be, what the charges would be.
And it's not a very easy process. So, we do recommend get a trusted advisor to help you through that process.
So timing is a key issue here, because it could take time to get the approval as well in time.
Exactly, that's right.
And is it specific to the particular property, the approval?
The exemption certificate allows you to purchase pretty much any residential property within 12 months in the designated state that you've requested that exemption certificate from.
Right.
Okay. Now another question we get asked is the impact of property developers, right? So property developers also have an impact on this because they can get a new dwelling exemption certificate for the development that they're proposing. So if they obtain that, and as a temporary resident or a non-resident, you wish to purchase a new dwelling through them, then you don't have to individually go through that approval process because the property developer has kind of done it for you.
Right. So if you're a temporary resident or a non-resident who is going to buy a property that is being developed as a foreign investor, you don't have to apply it through to FIRB.
Yes, I mean, obviously there's limitations and restrictions imposed. One general one is that the amount is generally up to $3 million. But there are other restrictions imposed. Best to search the FIRB's website.
For specific.
To get further details about that. One other thing I do want to mention. So, for temporary residents, yes, they can buy an existing dwelling, and as I said before, they must use that as a principal place of residence. Non-residents, however, are not allowed to purchase an existing dwelling. Right? There is a catch to that. So essentially, the two exceptions to that rule are if a non-resident wishes to purchase an existing dwelling, they must purchase it for redevelopment purposes. So essentially, they must either add a new house or knock down, rebuild, add 2 houses on the property. But the overall housing stock should increase. The Australian housing stock should increase if they wish to purchase an existing dwelling. They obviously have to get approval for that as well, and it is a challenging process. But when it comes to new dwellings or near new dwellings, so when I say near new dwellings, I mean, a developer's released a bunch of lots or property, and the settlement hasn't been completed. The person or people that were residing in it have resided in it for less than 12 months. That's classified as a new dwelling. So new or near new dwellings can be purchased by temporary residents and non-residents. but there is also additional requirements for that. So, for
Nothing-
example,
Nothing comes easy.
if you purchase land only, right, that land must be constructed on within 4 years.
Wow.
Mhm.
So you can't just buy and sit on it.
Exactly.
Yeah,
So you
wait for
can't-
capital
you can't
growth.
just buy and sit on it.
I've got a question as well. So does that mean foreign investors have to get the FIRB approval before they start looking for a property?
That would be ideal.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because we do know that FIRB does normally take 4 to 6, 8 weeks sometimes for approval if being granted. So
Okay.
you
But then
probably-
allows you for the next 12 months
To-
to buy a property within the range that you're searching in.
Yep.
So
Generally 12 months.
generally.
Yeah, so those are the main things. Look, there's a lot of additional things involved depending on which visa you have, the length of the visa, or for foreign investors as well. For example, they have to pay an additional stamp duty surcharge.
That's
which,
what I was going to come up with. So Belinda Chu was asking that question. What happens to stamp duty when you're buying it as a non-Australian citizen?
So, I mean, this crosses over to the taxation side of things as well.
Yeah, so
But
general.
as a general standpoint, it depends state by state, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, New South Wales imposes an additional 8% stamp duty on purchases
on top of the
for-
standard.
on top of the standard for
Mm.
non-residents.
Mm.
But yeah, it really does depend state by state.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, so there's individual advice, and I'm assuming the same would happen for capital gains for those that are buying as an investment property.
Once
They
again,
would have,
That'll be
yeah,
different,
once again,
um,
that does come through to
yeah.
the
So
taxation
which
side of things.
which actually brings us to a topic that's something that we need to get a professional to come and talk about
Yeah.
as well, because it is very interesting to
Yeah.
know. Okay, well, how much more do you end up? It makes sense. Like if you hear about, like, it is a touchy topic about foreigners coming in to buy properties and taking it, that opportunity away from those that are here buying here. But there's a lot of hurdles that they have to
Yeah.
jump.
It's not
That's a
easy
fact.
exercise.
It's not something that they can just come in and start.
That's a fact. So there's more steps involved, more expense involved. But look, there are people that can
Continue.
conquer all those hurdles and pay the fees they want to pay. Yeah, it comes out at the end of the day if it's worthwhile for them to invest or not.
And
Exactly.
you're buying street estate in Australia, which is the most
Yeah.
premium real estate in the world. So
Yeah, even
Well,
going
I mean,
through.
with Sydney property prices these days, I'd be surprised to see which temporary residents are actually purchasing property.
Yeah.
It's not easy. That's why a lot of it's saved for permanent residents or citizens.
Yeah.
To be honest, we rarely get many temporary residents actually interested in purchasing property because a lot of them are just struggling to survive with the amount of expenses,
Yeah,
day-to-day expenses.
exactly.
correct.
Now, in terms of there was a question here before about, and I think it's dispelling a myth. What is can you buy a property to get permanent residency? There was I think it could be a genuine thought process that someone
Yes.
might have, that, hey, if I actually invest in the country, the government might give me a permanent residency.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that. How does that
Look,
work?
To be honest, we get asked this question a lot.
Yeah.
If it was true, then the property prices in Sydney would be even higher
more.
than they are. Right?
Yeah.
So look, unfortunately, there's no mechanism to obtain permanent residency through purchasing property. There's not even any mechanism to get temporary residence through purchasing property. In terms of the benefits of purchasing property outside of capital gains or whatever you receive, one of the benefits is depending on state by state. So for like a 491 visa or a 190 visa, which are state nominated visas, sometimes a state will award you extra points or an extra benefit if you have property in that state. So for example, if we look at the Australian Capital Territory, to be eligible for a points-based skilled migration visa there, one of the categories is whether you have any property, residential property in Canberra, right? So if you do have any property, depending on the value of that property, you may be awarded additional points, which may assist you in getting that state nomination. But on an overall standpoint, purchasing property is not going to get you residency.
Yeah.
There's another benefit as well. So, for example, if you're a foreign investor and you purchase property in Australia, you can use that as a means to obtain a visitor visa, obviously subject to approval and subject to the fact that you comply with all the other conditions of that visitor visa. But sometimes it does assist in getting that visitor visa approval, because you can say I have a genuine need to come to Australia, and one of that genuine need is that, you know, I need to go and check up on my property. But yes, an overall standpoint, buying property will not get you a visa, so let's bust that myth. Forever.
Yeah, exactly.
No shortcuts.
There's no shortcuts.
That's
okay.
right.
So basically, in a nutshell, or as a summary, a permanent resident has basically very
the
similar
same rights.
Yeah.
The same rights as a citizen.
Yeah, and it's only the temporary residents or non-residents that have restrictions placed, and it pays to be discussing this through a professional like yourself, a migration agent,
Exactly.
to be able to discuss your individual circumstances and what that allows you to do. We have a question: do you get first home grant on a 188 visa?
On a 188 visa, if you're the holder of a 188 visa, look, to be honest, with first home buyers grants, once again, that doesn't really fall into the field of migration law. I can definitely assess that for you, but probably better to speak to your accountant.
If that's a non-resident visa, you will not qualify, I'm pretty sure.
Because the 188 in itself is a temporary visa, right? To the permanent version of the 188 visa is the 888 visa, right? So once you have a 888 visa, you're classified as a permanent resident. So as a permanent resident, you may be qualifying for that grant, but as a temporary resident, I am not confident regarding that.
But we can search that offline anyway.
Yeah, we're happy to get back to you, Dinakar, and come back to you about that. Now, in terms of mortgages, let's just talk about what are the different visa classes and how. I'm sure it's a very varied topic as well, because it's case by case. But what are the things that you've come across as who can get a loan if they're not Australian citizens?
Yeah. So in terms of non-resident getting mortgages, it depends on the visa type, subclass again as well. Is a spouse or single or married? Different lenders will provide different LVRs on the mortgage. Interest rates are normally higher as well, and there's a lot of lenders out there that will not do it as well. So it all comes down to the visa type. When does a visa expire in terms of getting lending? So there's not a concrete, straightforward answer.
But it's again something worth discussing.
But
so if it's something that you're wanting to find out more about your specific requirements or your specific visa class, we're happy to be.
So normally with each of the banks, we can check the visa subclasses before lodging the deal.
Yes, every
so
bank
we can
has
check straight away, do you even qualify? And if you do qualify, what is the LVR? What's the maximum you can borrow? And some postcodes or some suburbs are even ruled out for some visa subclasses as well. So,
And we were talking previously about sort of the major investments, so sort of like the 5 million investments. What are the larger investors? What are the implications?
So another common question we get from high net worth individuals is, I've got X amount in the bank, can I get a visa to Australia, right? So the short answer to that is not necessarily. It really depends on your individual circumstances, right? So in terms of business and investor visas, there's 3 main streams. So the business innovation stream, the investor stream, and the significant investor stream. So the business innovation and investor stream, they are both points-based visas, right? So in terms of satisfying the points requirements, it's made up of, your English, your age, the net business assets that you have, the turnover of your business, and in differentiating those two visas, the investor visa also requires an additional $1.5 million investment in designated investment vehicles, right? So those two require you to be nominated by a state, okay? You need to have at least 65 points, and essentially, if you're invited, then you apply for the visa. So it's not something that you say, okay, look, I've got what I need, I'm just going to apply for the visa, right? Yeah. It's invitation based.
So someone from here, from Australia, would have to invite?
Pretty much the government has to invite you.
Yep.
Each state has their own nomination criteria. So depending on which state you wish to apply for, you have to assess what their nomination criteria is. Essentially, if you satisfy the criteria, you're invited. At the time of invitation, you are proving to the government that yes, I've claimed XYZ and I have evidence of that. And once your claims match your evidence, that's when you actually get the visa. Okay, so that's the business innovation and the investor stream. The significant investor stream, that's also based on state nomination. However, you're investing $5 million, right? So because you're investing such a large chunk, they waive the points requirement for you. So you don't have to satisfy any points requirement. But that $5 million investment, firstly, you got to show that all that money is clean.
White money.
Exactly, white money, pretty much.
One way
so
or
you
the
have
other.
to show all that money is clean, and moreover, that money needs to be invested into designated investment vehicles. So, for example, $500,000 in venture capital and growth private equity funds. $1.5 million in approved managed funds, and a balancing investment of at least $3 million in other managed funds. The main question that people have is, can I just buy a $5 million property?
Yeah, exactly.
And get that visa? The answer to that is no.
Okay.
So it's important to note that direct investment into residential real estate is prohibited. Okay. However, you can indirectly get around that. So if you invest into a managed fund that is predominantly made up of property or whatever it is, you can invest indirectly, but you can't just
buy a property.
Residential real estate worth $5 million and qualify for that visa.
Okay, there you go. Well, thank you very much for joining us. Very insightful. I'm sure we'll have a lot of other questions answered afterwards as well, once this video is seen by a lot more people as well. So do feel free to comment below. We'll be happy to come back to you on those responses. I'll be tagging, I think he's already tagged, so you'll be able to contact directly from iVisaPoint about anything else that you would like to discuss in detail. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much, guys. And just before we close, on that note, I just want to give a disclaimer that any advice or any information mentioned here is general advice. Please do not go and make decisions based on this advice. If you do wish to make any decisions regarding immigration, regarding property investment or anything like that, please seek a certified professional in that specific field before making that decision.
There you go.
100%.
Very important.
Very important.
And do join us next week as well, where we'll be talking to two guest speakers, an accountant and another individual, about buying a property through super. So through your superannuation fund, it's a question we get asked all the time. How do you actually buy a property through super? We will be answering that for you next week, 3 o'clock Thursday. Thank you very much for tuning in. We'll see you guys next time.
Thank you, guys.
See you guys.
Take care.